All right, ladies and gentlemen, I hope you're as excited as I am right now to talk about the man of the hour, the man that puts the D in Will of D because his name actually starts with the letter D, and he's best friends with Tenacious D. I'm, of course, referring to Dalton. Oh, yeah! None of that was sarcasm or hyperbole, by the way. I am genuinely pumped to talk about Dalton. He is such a fascinating character. He really is. In fact, he's such a cool character. I'm going to do something I don't think I've ever done before. I'm going to take off my little logo down here, yeah, and I'm going to replace it with Dalton. Oh yeah, that's how tubular, that's how radical he is. There are not enough 90s slang terms to properly describe Dalton. In fact, I have an English dictionary right here, and I doubt in this entire book if there's any word that could properly encapsulate the awesomeness of Dalton. Bison. Okay, that one does kind of a good job, actually, because he does have the, bison zone. But, you know, okay, so, oh, by the way, one other thing before we get into this, I don't want to hear anybody saying that I'm losing my mind here because of the One Piece break, and I've resorted to talking about Dalton. Oh, no, I would have been making this video no matter what, because Dalton is a man that actually cares about you, okay? He is the king of the Sakura Kingdom, and I gotta be honest with you, if I had to get isekai'd, if I had to live in any kingdom in the One Piece world, I am probably picking Dalton's kingdom. Yeah, there's some other options out there that might be okay, and sure, Sakura Kingdom is a little cold, but I live out in Pennsylvania, way up in the mountains. I'm used to winter. I can handle that. Dalton is such a good king. He's down there helping his subjects, you know, build buildings and work on things with his hands, you know? Dalton is the kind of guy, like, you could be out there shoveling your sidewalk, and you could ask him, the king of the country, "Hey, Dalton, my back's acting up. Could you help me shovel?" He would be like, "You know what? Let me grab my shovel, let me grab my trusty spade and put on my boots, and I'll be right down to help you." That's the kind of nice guy Dalton is, and he is one of the best kings in the entire story, okay? So, by the way, I had to rewatch Drum Island. Like, I basically skimmed through it, but even then, I got kind of emotional because especially the scene with Hiraluk and then Dalton and then Chopper shows up and then the scene with Dalton and Chopper, it hits you hard. And we'll be getting into it in the video, but little emotional here, honestly, because, you know, it's easy to look at Dalton as a little boring because, you know, he has, like, Oda gave him a quirky personality in the sense that he just spouts off random trivia. That's, like, his thing. You know, be like, "Oh, you're going to go see Dr. Kureha. Well, she lives on top of the mountain in the castle. She also really enjoys plum sake." It's like, you know what? Actually, that's not completely invaluable information. They could have brought some plum sake as maybe payment for Dr. Kureha to treat the Nami, so that might have worked out, and they just chose not to listen to him. But anyway, that's his one quirky thing. But other than that, he's a pretty serious kind of character, which you might equate to being boring. I equate to it being sensible. He is a reasonable, logical human being. When pirates showed up at his island, he mobilized a local militia to go and attack them. Okay, now the Straw Hats eventually convinced them that, like, hey, we're not actually trying to kill you guys. We're just here to get some medical help for our friend. Coincidentally, Drum Island was well known for its medical science and research, so it's a really good thing they were on that island when they got there. But Dalton, like I said, very sensible. He's not somebody that's easily tricked. He's not just going to be like, "Oh, you guys are friends? All right, let them through." It takes some convincing, and Vivi is the one that kind of parlays that there because she's a princess. They go into the village, and Dalton shows them around, and, you know, he's not quite the king yet. The country doesn't really have a king or a name at that moment because that's when Wapol ditched the whole thing after Blackbeard and his crew showed up, right? So this is like a few months after that. After Blackbeard attacked Drum, he leaves. He takes Chess and Kurl Marimo and all of his, like, retinue and the Ishii-20. They all leave Drum Island, and Dalton stays behind. And Dalton is, like, I think actually he was in the jail cell maybe at that point because he was kind of in prison for a long time after what happened with Hiraluk. So eventually he's released. He gets out, and the people of the country don't blame him for everything that Wapol became. They know Dalton as the stalwart and honorable guard of the castle, like, you know, the chief commander and everything like that, right? We get a little bit of his backstory, but not quite a lot of it. He mentions that the former king of Drum he owes a life debt to him, okay? So something happened in Dalton's backstory. Given that this is One Piece, maybe Dalton was an orphan or he was adrift at sea at one point, and the former king of Drum, which was Wapol's father, father maybe found him and is like, oh, you can serve as the castle guard or the palace guard, and he rose through the ranks to eventually become the commander. So we don't know exactly the nature of that debt that he owes, but just think about it from Dalton's perspective. If he was, let's say, his life was saved by the former king. And we do see the king very briefly in Strong World in, Chapter 0. We see him there talking to Dalton, and he's talking about how he's like, hey, king, I think Prince Wapol's getting a little bit too spoiled. It's kind of nerve-wracking that he's going to lead the country someday. He might not be a great king. And even the former king, Wapol's father, was like, yeah, I'm not really sure about what's going to happen here. So eventually, the former king dies, Wapol takes over, and it's like a total Joffrey situation, man. It is not good, okay? So on one hand, you have Dalton's sense of duty to the crown, where it's like, hey, your father, Wapol, saved my life. I have some life debt to him, and he's dead now, so I guess that carries over to you. But at the same time, Wapol is like a horrible human being that like just ravages the land and makes sure to like all the doctors only work for him, and he's only going to allow them to treat other people if they pay him first, and like just extort a crazy amount of money out of them. So he is an awful king. And then when the first sign of trouble happens, when Blackbeard's crew's there, Wapol doesn't even try to fight him. He's just out. Now, obviously, Wapol would not have been able to win, which, that would have been a fascinating what-if scenario if Blackbeard just storms the castle and just kills everybody, kills Wapol and Chess, although maybe not, because that means also the Ishi 20 might have died too, and that's not great either. So he ditched, he left, and then Dalton was the only one remaining, okay? But the citizens don't blame him for that, because they know Dalton is a cool guy, and they basically made him like their de facto king, even though he's really humble, and he's like, I don't really want to be king. I couldn't possibly be king. I mean, I worked for Wapol, so I'm a little bit complicit in everything that he did, and he struggles with that, and he feels guilt about that. Not the least of which is what happened during Chopper and Herook's backstory, okay? Where at that point, Dalton was just completely this country is ruined. It's gone. I don't know if anything's going to be able to save it, And then Herook arrives after Wapol's ruse of like, oh, the Ishi 20 are sick with an unknown illness. And then Herook arrives, and we have the epic moment where Ave Maria cues up in the anime, and he's sitting there and he takes a drink, and he's like, when does a man die? When he eats an incurable poisonous mushroom, or when he's attacked or shot? No, a man dies when he's forgotten. And Herook's going through his awesome speech and of how people are remembered and how like the ultimate cure, how things can be cured, any illness. And then Dalton is there, and there's just tears streaming down his face, because when he first joined the Palace Guard, Drum Island was like a beacon to the world. It was literally the epicenter of medical research in the entire One Piece world. Maybe like Egghead, what Dr. Vegapunk is cooking up, but aside from that, like Drum Island is the one that's going to send the doctors and train the doctors, that's going to save countless lives and cure all these illnesses. And at the beginning, I'm sure Dalton had such pride in that. He was like the palace commander. I'm picturing the ceremony where that happened, where the king tells him, I'm going to make you the captain of the guard of Drum Island. And I'm sure the level of pride and honor that Dalton felt at that moment was just like immense. And there was a big ceremony, and he pinned a medal to him, and the king was like smiling, probably viewed Dalton more as his son than Wapol, who was probably off picking his nose or something. Like, whatever, this ceremony sucks. I don't care, man. When are we going to eat? Right? And Dalton, he gets up. He's like been knighted by the king or something, and just being like, rise, Sir Dalton, and be the king of the palace guard or whatever. And he gets up, and he's just like, thank you, king. I'm ultimately honored. Unnamed Drum Island king. Unnamed king who is Wapol's father. And he's had such pride in it. But then when the king died, maybe Wapol might have had something to do with that, because Wapol was kind of a dick. I don't put it past him for poisoning his own father. He's done worse things. And so Dalton had no choice at that point, because he was the captain of the guard. He had to be loyal to Wapol. And that was, the king's son. And he's just like, he probably was a little conflicted. Like, I can't just straight up kill the king's son. Even though he's dead, I still owe a debt to him. And, I love this country. I'm not just going to kill him. So he has to sit there and watch Wapol just ruin everything. Like, the entire country, this beacon of hope, and it is slowly, Wapol's up there one day, and he's like, hey, How come we're giving out free healthcare to all the people in the island? They should be paying for that shit. Round up all the doctors, tell them they work for me now, and no one's allowed to help anyone unless I say so, because I'm the king. And then Dalton has to sit next to him, not only listen to this bullshit, but also protect him from any kind of like uprisings or coups or something. Dalton has to be the guy to protect this son of a bitch, right? And so I'm sure Dalton tried his best. I'm sure Dalton really tried to Wapol-sama or Lord Wapol, the way that your father always, I don't care about that, I'm the king now. Chess and Kuromarimo were also recruited as like chief guards as well, so they were definitely up there. Like the three of them, Dalton, Chess, and Kuromarimo were like the strongest force on drum. And Chess and Kuromarimo, were recruited by Wapol because they think similar, like, let me get some yes men that'll do whatever I say, that are super loyal, and that understand that I'm the one in charge and the king is whatever the king says goes, okay? They might have even been planning to, eliminate Dalton at some point if he got really annoying, and he basically did. So what happened was, after Hiraluk blows up, after he dies, and Wapol has, that entire speech, by the way, went right over Wapol's head, because, Hiraluk's going on this whole thing about what it means to be a person and what it means to be a doctor, and then he dies, and then Wapol's like, oh my god, he blew himself up, what an idiot, who does that? And then Chopper arrives, and then just roids out and just starts charging at Wapol, like he's just gonna rip his damn head off. And one of the last things that Hiraluk said, though, was, hey, in a few moments after I'm gone, my son is going to be arriving, and he was like, a monster's going to be arriving, and he's my son. Please don't hurt him, okay? And so Chopper shows up. He rampages. He's raging. He's going. And Dalton goes into his bison form, his hybrid form. First zone ever shown in the story was Dalton. And he clashes with Chopper there. And it's actually kind of Dalton's words and his tears, because even in his bison form, he's like, tears are just streaming down his face and just landing on Chopper. And he manages to even in Chopper's rage mode, he was able to overpower Chopper and get him down. And he tells him, and he's crying, and the tears are hitting Chopper's face, and his eyes are all like red with rage, and they begin to calm down. And then Chopper starts crying too, and then Dalton's there, and he's just like, listen to me, you gotta stop, okay? If you can't beat me, you have no hope of beating him. If you charge, you're gonna die, and Hiraluk would not want that for you. It's not worth it. Do not throw your life away for this country. It's not worth it, okay? And so he's crying, and Chopper gets up, and he allows Chopper to take Hiraluk's remains, whatever was left, his hat at least, and he walks back down the mountain. And Wapol's back there, and he's like, what are you doing, Dalton? You let him get away. And Dalton tells Wapol off, and it's a cathartic scene, because he's just like, shut your fat mouth! The only man that gave a shit about this country just died while you laughed. And he says that, it doesn't matter if medical science progresses. It doesn't matter because this country is led by a fool. And there's no cure for fools. And then that was the thing, because he just called the king a fool. So Wapol was like, oh, there's no cure for fools. Wait a minute, are you calling me a fool? Fool? Whatever. I'm the king. I'm Wapol, right? So, Dalton does attempt to kill Wapol right there. He does try, but then Wapol consumes the weaponry in the Drum Island Castle Armory, and he uses his Baku factory to turn into, this ultimate, doomsday weapon, cannons for arms and stuff, and, super reinforced armor, and just Dalton can't hurt him, okay? He can't win. So he gets defeated, and he gets thrown into the dungeons. They don't kill him, because I think first of all, Wapol is a sadistic guy, and he's just like, oh, I'm gonna beat it out of Dalton. I'm gonna get it to the point where he realizes that I'm the king, and his freaking humanitarianism and his care for other people is beaten out of him, right? So he tortures him, and so does Chess and Kuromarimo, and just this is constant. But Dalton never gives up, and he never relinquishes it. He was straight up tortured, and it was just I will live, and I will carry on the will of Dr. Hiraluk. And then we could assume he stayed in the dungeons until Blackbeard attacked, and then everybody left, and then maybe when Kureha showed up, she let Dalton out of the dungeons, and then he went down to go help the people and stuff like that, all right? And so the people, honored him for that. It's just like, hey, you fought back against Wapol. He was a horrible person, right? And so that brings us up to the present of the story when Wapol returns during the Drum Island arc. He's back, and one of the first things that Dalton does, as soon as he hears that Wapol has landed back on the island, he's like, nope, I'm done. I don't care. I don't care whatever debt that I owed to the former king. The former king would probably also agree Wapol has to go. He's a problem. And so he charges to the battlefield. He goes into his full bison form. First zone introduces the concept. This is actually the arc we find out the different types of devil fruits to even begin with, okay? So Logia's was with Smoker. That was the first one we learned there. I guess the first Paramecia technically wasn't Luffy. It was actually Buggy, I suppose. And then he's the first zone. So at that point, Oda reveals what the three types are, and then zones have their hybrid form, full animal form, and everything like that. So the first one was the Ushi model bison. Actually, we see what it looks like in one of the magazines. And Dalton was a real man to eat a fruit that had horns sticking out of it. Just like, oh, that's real keratin right there. Ah, yeah, that's good. So he turns into a bison, and we only see one named technique that he uses with his weapon. As you can see down here, so Dalton's weapon, it's always been said it's a spade. And that was always a little confusing to me because I always assumed a spade was just another name for a shovel. Okay, because sometimes I hear that being used interchangeably. So, and I thought it was like a battle shovel, like he's Shovel Knight or something, right? Like it's a flat shovel that has a blade instead of like a blunt edge, right? So no, a spade is like an actual weapon, although it doesn't quite look like this. Like this is an idea of like a Shaolin spade, like kind of what it looks like. It's a much more narrow, though it's kind of like a blunt, like polearm, not blunt. It's a polearm weapon that has a wide blade to it, but it doesn't look quite like this. So it's like I guess maybe it was made specifically for Dalton, like that's the weapon that he felt like most comfortable fighting with, and especially in his human beast form. Maybe the old king had this commissioned for him with like one of the town's like blacksmiths or something, like made him a special weapon just for Dalton or something like that, right? It's a pretty cool looking weapon though. It's pretty unique. So he charges in and he decapitates Wapol. Like, okay, so in the anime, he just cuts him like here in the chest, and then the Ishii 20 show up and are like operating, and they fix up Wapol like that. In the manga, he straight up decapitates him, cuts his damn head off. And it's played for kind of like comedy's sake, where the Ishii 20, I don't even know, because the Ishii 20, and it's One Piece, it's anime, it's not supposed to be taken seriously. Maybe like the Ishii 20 are so good at what they do at being doctors, they can even reattach a severed head. Like that's how good they are at it, okay? Which also, by the way, if that's the medical science that exists on Drum, I'm imagining there's also some really good doctors at Marijois, and if you've ever wondered how the hell Charlos survived all the damage he incurred during Reverie, that's probably why. They probably have the best doctors in the world at Marijois, and they can operate on the World Nobles, and so even though Charlos should have died there, we've seen like people being decapitated and just attach the head back and just, you're fine, so that happens. So, hey, it's the thought that counts, when you try to decapitate somebody. I mean, he did succeed, So the only technique, though, we actually hear him use is Fiddle Banff. And it's named after Banff National Park, which is located in Alberta, Canada, where the buffalo roam. See, check out those buffalo. They're roaming around. Actually, these are not really buffalo. These are buffalo. This is a bison. It's just in America, especially, we usually call them buffalo, bison, is kind of like interchangeably. By the way, as a student of American history, nobody tell Dalton what happened to the bison back in like the 1800s. No one bring that up to him. It's a sensitive subject, right? Okay. But suffice it to say, we've all seen at least pictures of a bison, giant animal, horns, big head, can charge, can trample. You don't want to piss one of these things off. And you also don't want to piss off Dalton, right? And so he has a lot of raw zone strength, but he's not ultimately powerful when it comes to like weapons and stuff. Like all the cannons and everything that Wapol absorbed, he just couldn't beat him, right? He just got defeated. But hey, it's the thought that counts. He tries. Okay. So actually, all of the citizens of the town try to mobilize and fight Wapol together. Wapol has his own retinue. He has Chess, Kuromarimo. He has his white walkie, Robson, I think his name was. He also has like some guards that were hanging out with him. And so the citizens are like, no, Dalton, let us fight with you. We're going to drive Wapol out. And Dalton is like so sure that the citizens are all going to die. He's like, no, you can't. And so Chess is about to fire some arrows, and Dalton jumps out in front and just takes these 3 arrows, like these giant arrows, to the chest. And he's like, oh, move. And he falls down. So that was an epic moment. It's a chapter literally called, I think, My Name is Dalton, or His Name is Dalton, okay? So he's injured, but the Straw Hats are there, and they arrive and try to patch him up a little bit and everything. There's a really cool scene I remember where they have to get to the castle near the end of the arc, and Usopp is there, and Usopp is kind of inspired by everybody, you know, in the village talking about how great Dalton was, and they all got to work together, and they got to defeat Wapol and everything, and Usopp is like, okay, well, if I have to do this, I'll have to do this. And he's like, okay, Dalton, hop on my back, and I'll take you to the castle. And Dalton is, like, huge. Dalton is, like, a really tall guy. I don't know what his height is. Usopp's like my height. Usopp's like 5'7" or whatever. But Dalton is, let's see here. Dalton is 7'2". Dalton's a big boy, all right? He's a big guy, all right? Oh, by the way, I don't know if this might be a situation like retconning the age, like what happened to Caesar. Like, remember when Caesar was supposed to be 40, and then the backstory with Mads just didn't make any sense because he would have been like 10, so they changed his age to 55. That might be the same thing with Dalton, because if his age right now is listed at 35, so before the time skip he would be 33, which in this flashback right here to Drum Island, this is during when the king was still alive. This was like 20-something years ago. Dalton would have been like 13 in this backstory, and he just looks like, I mean, he's got a beard already, and he's already super muscular, so I'm not really sure. So there might be some retcon there with that. But at any rate, 7 foot. He's tall, right? And so Usopp's like, hop on my back. I'll take you to the castle. And Dalton's like, are you sure? And he's like, I can handle it. And Dalton's like, okay. And he actually does. He like climbs on the back of Usopp, and Usopp's like, you know, but that's Usopp's shining moment in the Drum Island arc. And then Zoro, of course, is just like, all right, you won me over. Just, come on, guy, let's go. And Dalton's like, oh, so strong. It's like, indeed. Right, let's go. You know what? Dalton also reminds me a little bit of Halsin from Baldur's Gate 3. A little bit. Like, if he was playing D&D, I feel like he would be a druid. He's dressed in green, maybe a ranger, but he's dressed in green. He can wild shape into a bison. Dalton is a druid, definitely, okay? I think Dalton and Halsin would be good drinking buddies, okay? That'd be fun. Anyway, so they're heading to the castle, and this is, while this is going on, Luffy and Chopper and Sanji and Kureha, they're all fighting against Wapol's retinue up on the castle itself while all this is happening, so they're kind of arriving to be, you know, reinforcements, right? And Dalton, he's like, okay, he's thinking back on everything that happened to him throughout his entire life, and we don't get to see every little bit of his flashback, you know, like where he came from or like how he became a part of the palace guard or anything. But we get the flashback of him being tortured by Chess and Kuromarimo and Wapol and everybody in the castle. And he realizes what needs to be done. And he understands what he has to do. And he kind of decides to pull a hero look, and he pulls out a row of dynamite. He just pulls out a bunch of dynamite out of his jacket, and he's just like, everybody, once we reach the castle, stay away from the entrance. I'll handle this. And he just, like, takes a lighter, and it's like, whoa, okay, buddy, jeez. But, you know, like, that gives you, thank God, it was, like, right around this same time that Luffy bazookaed Wapol all the way to the South Blue, so they won. They beat him. But it's a good thing, because Wapol was so dedicated to kill Wapol at that point, he would have sacrificed himself. So thankfully that didn't happen, and they made it to the castle, and then Luffy defeated Wapol, and he has the flag, and everything's awesome, and Chopper's okay, and Kureha's there, and, you know, they eventually have the cherry blossoms bloom in the country, and then Dalton and Kureha are watching Chopper leave with the Straw Hats, and that's when Goldie Roger's first mentioned, and that's when we also go into the flashback with Dalton having about Reverie, where he met Vivi for the first time, and Cobra. And how, like, Wapol was such a horrible king. He, like, slapped Vivi when she was, like, a little kid. And Vivi, like, understood, even at that young age, that, like, if she cried or threw a tantrum, I mean, she got smacked in the face. I mean, it would be fair if she did. But if she did that, that could result in a war. So she was very respectful, and she was just like, I'm so sorry. I didn't know I was walking there. I shouldn't have done that. And then, Wapol was just like, whatever. And then Dalton had to be the one, because Igaram was there, and he was really pissed. And Dalton had to be the one to go over to Igaram and be like, I am so sorry that my king did that. He's a real asshole, but I mean, I want to get rid of him. I just don't know what to do. And Igaram's kind of like, yeah, okay. I mean, like, sure. Yeah, just like, it's like that kind of guy that's like someone in your family or your friend did something really stupid and you have to go over and be like, I am so sorry that happened. It's just like, yeah. Okay, so we have that flashback there with Vivi and all that stuff. And, yeah, we've seen Dalton several times since then. We've seen him there. He's always helping out the citizens. He recruited. He's really changed the economy and the culture of Drum Island. He changed it to the Sakura Kingdom. That's the official name. He adopted Hiraluk's flag, which is a skull and crossbones. It's a Jolly Roger. That's the official flag of a country that's allied with the world government. I don't know how anybody feels about that, but they allowed it, so there it goes. He integrated the Lopins into the palace security. So he gave the Lopins like cool outfits and they fight alongside the palace security guards. He gave the guards special helmets that look like Chopper's helmets, and he works with Kureha, and they're the Ishi 20 are now the Ishi 100, and they hang out in the castle, and Kureha teaches them and everything. And Dalton doesn't even live in the castle. That's the crazy thing. Kureha even said, like, come on, Dalton, you're the king. You should live in the castle. I'll rent you a room for a cheap rate. We're friends, so I'll let you there for half price. And Dalton's like, nah, don't worry about it, Kureha. I guess Kureha lives in the castle with the Ishi 100, and it's basically a medical school that Kureha runs. And so Dalton's just living in the village. I'm sure Dalton lives in just a humble little cottage, maybe a little bit outside of town. And he's just happy, sitting in front of a nice warm fire on a cold winter island winter night and sipping some hot cocoa, which is his favorite beverage after all, because we always love Dalton's random trivia that he always says. He's like, oh, they're heading to Robelltown. Robelltown? Ice skating is very popular there. That's not relevant, but okay. Maybe he likes to go ice skating on his free time. There it is, right? But anyway, yeah. So then he shows up at Reverie, though, like hundreds of chapters later. And I love that chapter when he shows up to Reverie and Wapol's there. And Wapol tries to give him the business. Like, oh, a servant like you is a king now. Don't make me laugh. And Dalton doesn't take any of that shit. He can't outright, like, attack Wapol because they're at the Reverie. But he goes into his hybrid form and he's just like, back off, Wapol. Ooh. We're on equal footing now. And then Wapol is like, whatever. And he like marches away in a huff. And they're like, oh, wow, Dalton, you're becoming quite a good king yourself. He's like, oh, gee, shucks, I don't know about that. Solid guy. Solid dude. Sensible dude. Bison dude. I hope we get to see some more Dalton in the future. Maybe he'll join the final battle. I mean, like, dude, if we're gonna do some, like, Lord of the Rings type deal, or, like, oh, everybody joins together for the final battle, like, something like that, I would love Dalton to be there. I would love Dalton and the Lopins from Drum Island to be a mobilized force that show up to, like, assist the Straw Hats in their greatest need. Not to fight against any major character. Oh, maybe he could fight against Wapol. That would actually be really cool. If Wapol is, like, somehow he ends up from Morgan's place and he's, like, working with the government again, or because he knows some information about something, or maybe he learned from Morgan's. At any rate, I would love to see that. I would love to see, you could have the Lopins all fighting like random Marines or random members of like whatever group they're fighting at that point. But I want to see Dalton just go right up against Wapol and just like, it's going to be different this time because Dalton's been training. Maybe Dalton's got hockey now, and Wapol, Wapol doesn't have hockey. He doesn't train in any of that. And Wapol will be like, I beat you before, I'll beat you again. And Dalton's like, I don't know. And I don't think it's going to be like, I don't think it's going to be like a whole chapter, but even like a couple of pages in like the final battle to see Dalton, maybe it just one-shots him, just one-shots Wapol and just that's it. That would be cool, all right? But then again, I feel like there'd be more weight to that, so I feel like whatever Oda has planned probably wouldn't incorporate Dalton or Wapol at all, but if it did, if it incorporated a bunch of characters in one final battle, you might as well take your time. You might as well take your time to show us, like a scene where Dalton cuts down Wapol and they have a couple of lines together and Wapol is just like, so this is the way it ends, this is how I die, and Dalton's like, you had every opportunity. You had every opportunity to not, you could have followed by your father's example. He was a good king. You could have listened to your dad. You could have listened to the people. You chose to be this piece of shit. So you know what? It's over now. You're out of second chances. Boom! And then just kills him. You know what I mean? There's no doctors coming to save you now. You know, that would be pretty cool. All right, anyway, that's the video, and now for the next video, we got a spin D wheel. So spin the Dalton wheel, so we'll see what happens. Let's go. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we got this nice-looking wheel over here. Let's give it a spin and see where it lands. Da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da. Ooh, that's a good one. Best arc tier list. So the next video, next stream is going to be a tier list stream, and we're going to talk about the best arc in One Piece. This is gonna be intense. This is gonna be contentious for sure. After all, we all know the best arc in the entire story is Long Ring Longland, so that's gonna be S tier, obviously. But I don't know where we're going, everybody. All right, so catch you back here next time. Later.